Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Vector's webinar on getting ahead and staying ahead, interviewing and upskilling for data, AI, and ML roles with Vector and Phase AI. My name is Johanna, and on behalf of everyone at Vector, I want to thank you for spending this time with us today. We know some of you today might be feeling anxious about applying for roles. Technical interviews might seem daunting, and you might not be quite sure on what skills you need to work on to make sure to stand out in this job market. But we hope today's session will help with that by sharing about skills that are currently in demand, how to improve throughout your career, and how to prepare for technical interviews, including some sage advice from industry veterans who are hiring managers. I would like to begin by acknowledging and thanking our funders, the province of Ontario, the Government of Canada through the Pan-Canadian AI Strategy administered by CFAR, and industry sponsors from across the Canadian economy. I now want to take the time and acknowledge the land on which Vector is located in Toronto, which is now a meeting place for many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, as well as newcomers to Canada from around the globe. The land Vector is situated on is a traditional territory of many nations, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. We are very grateful for being hosted on this land. Before we get started and introduce Wojciech today, who will be delivering this webinar, I wanted to share two upcoming opportunities from Vector you may be interested in. November 10th, there will be a Vector Distinguished Talk from faculty member Gautam Kamath, who is a world leader in privacy and machine learning, and he will be speaking about the promise and pitfalls of public data and private ML. This event is virtual and open to everyone, so please attend and feel free to share with your friends in AI as well. So I will put the link in the chat for you to register for that event. The second opportunity is on November 8th. There'll be a webinar where you can learn more about the next cohort of the Machine Learning Associate Program, which is a 4-month paid program for next term that empowers students and recent graduates to boost their AI skills and support small, medium businesses in their innovation journey. This next cohort is taking on Machine Learning Associates on univariate and multivariate forecasting, and I will drop the link for this webinar below. Everyone who registers for this webinar will also receive the application link, and the deadline is in about 2 weeks, so please check that out as well. Now, I would like to introduce Wojciech, who is from Phase AI and delivering today's webinar. He is an AI researcher and data scientist and an alumnus of Oxford University, where he studied on a Rhodes Scholarship. In addition to working with organizations to build out their AI strategies, teams, and AI-driven products, he also founded and sold his own company in customer analytics, and of course, is the founder of Phase AI. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Wojciech.
Thank you very, very much, Johanna, for having me here today. And I'm so excited to sort of see all of you, and certainly excited to be talking about getting ahead and staying ahead. So we've got a lot of content to cover, so I'll be going through it fairly quickly. And at the same time, what I do want to encourage folks to do is to ask questions. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A. Feel free to submit them. And every 10-15 minutes or so, I'll do my best to stop for a bit, answer questions that you might have. So today's agenda from that perspective, we've got the introduction covered, which is great. And there's 3 major topics to this webinar that we'll be discussing. The first is recent trends. It's amazing how quickly AI is moving right now. It's mind-boggling, to be perfectly honest. And so since our last webinar back in March, lots has changed. And I do want to cover some of those things from a job search and employment perspective. Number 3, we'll be talking about skills and upskilling. So how do you actually keep up to date given how quickly things are changing? What can you do to make sure that employers and potential people you could be working with are actually finding you, that you have the right skills for them? And then we'll talk about technical interviews. So how do you prepare for them, what they look like, and we'll share some resources as well, because we know that oftentimes people are quite nervous about technical interviews. And finally, we have a great panel discussion today with James and Christina, who I'll be introducing later, who are actively hiring in data science, AI, and ML, and they'll be able to talk us through how they think about things, and they'll be able to ask questions or answer questions, of course, as well. So just very briefly, who am I? Johanna was very generous in her introduction, and so I'll just add a few details. My name is Wojciech. My email is w@phasei.com in case people have questions at any point after the webinar. I love AI ML. I've been working in the space for about 15 years now, and I've hired and recruited and worked with lots of folks, from people who are starting off their careers as data analysts to PhD level researchers. And one of the things that we found at Phase AI, as we work with organizations like the Vector Institute, with other companies, we find that there's often a pretty big disconnect where what employers are looking for might not be quite clear to people. And at the same time, a lot of folks on the job seeker side of things are often worried or nervous that they don't have the skills that they have. When in reality, there's actually a perfect match. It's more of a miscommunication that we want to address. And so from that perspective, we care deeply about what we're doing here, and we've been working with the Vector Institute for a few years now, which has been a wonderful, wonderful relationship. So before we actually get started, I'd love to just gauge the sentiment here from a attendee perspective. How do you feel about the job market today? Johanna or someone on the Vector team, I think we'll have to turn on the poll. But I'd love to hear or read how folks feel. So we'll give you 1 or 2 seconds or 5 seconds maybe to answer the question. Okay, maybe we could get the results up as well. Okay. Woo. Well, this is you know what, it's not surprising, and at the same time maybe even a little comforting for folks to see that 68% of people say it's concerning, harder than before. 25% say and so the vast majority of you, I think, are in the same bucket. So the nice thing about this, of course, is that it's not just you, right? I mean, oftentimes when we have one-on-ones with folks and talk to them about their careers, they think that they're the only ones that are struggling, when in reality we're all in a bit of a pickle, so to speak. And so from that perspective, hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better. And at the same time, hopefully this webinar will also help you address some of these concerns. So with that in mind, we'll start by talking about recent trends. So the way that I think about the employment market today when it comes to data, AI, ML is the more things change, the more they stay the same. Yes, there are a lot of changes, and I'll be talking about those, but at the same time, one of the things that hopefully will bring some comfort to you is that employers are often looking for very similar things. The specific skills or technologies might change, but when it comes to the big picture of how they're hiring, what they're looking for, all of that actually is fairly consistent over time. And if you adopt a strategy that addresses that, you'll be doing pretty well as well. So just to emphasize the change, though, our last webinar with the Vector Institute was 7 months ago, mid-March, so less than 7 months ago. This is what's happened since then. March 14th, which I believe was the day before the webinar, GPT-4 launched. That in and of itself is probably enough to already emphasize how much is changing and how quickly things are changing. But even since then, June 30th, halfway through the year, I recently read a report that said that generative AI VC investments are 6 times that of 2022. That's for half the year versus the full year prior. Llama 2 launched July 18th. And if you're following the whole open source model versus closed models, there's a huge debate that set off that continues to this very day. AudioCraft, which is another meta model, launched. Anthropic announced a $1.25 billion raise at the end of September, which since then is basically becoming a $4 billion raise. We've had Mistral launch. GPT-4 Vision has launched. And of course, if you're following the news, literally this week, AI safety is becoming such an important and big topic that everybody is talking about. Who knows where that'll be next week, let alone a month from now or a quarter from now. So things are changing really, really, really quickly. If you're a researcher, this chart might be particularly painful or exciting for you. These are archive submissions. You'll see most of the lines are kind of flat for all topics, except computer science. science, which has grown almost 5x in terms of number of submissions in the last 5 years. So lots of content being published just from a research perspective. Models are being launched, products are being launched, VCs are investing heavily. You're probably reading that AI skills are required more and more. And then again, if you're a little panicky given the poll, you might be wondering what the heck's going on? Why is no one replying to me, even though I have these skills? But employers are definitely looking for them. And at the same time, I want to emphasize too that this is happening across industries. So yes, computer science, obviously, and technology is an area where this is focused, but we're seeing quite a lot of investments in AI, ML, and hiring associated with that in medical, in cybersecurity, industrial automation, music, insurtech, et cetera. And I want to emphasize that too as a strategy. If you have a skill set that is different than AI, ML, but might be combined in some ways, then that's really, really important to also bring up and be aware of. But the point is, seemingly everybody's looking for AI, ML, and data skills. So hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better. Now, the other thing that's important to keep in mind here is that employees themselves are also investing in this. And so when you put yourself in in your own shoes and you're looking at who you're competing with, these are some of the things that they're doing. At the employee level, Salesforce recently released a report that said 75% of generative AI users are looking to automate tasks at work. 3 out of 5 workers are using or planning to use generative AI. 67% of IT leaders said they have prioritized generative AI for their business within the next 18 months. So this is something that everyone's doing, whether it's individual employees all the way to business leaders, and B, this is also something that's in roadmaps that will probably keep growing. And if not growing, at the very least, this excitement will remain for at least the next year or two, if not longer. But I want to emphasize also that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And what I mean by this is that same report and that same, obviously, organization, Salesforce, has also been tracking and following what are some of the major topics that are important to employers. And these are a little more consistent over the years. It's not PyTorch and diffusion models or LLMs. It's collaboration technology. It's digital and administrative technology. It's encryption. It's project management. And of course, data science more broadly, DB management, database management, analytics, et cetera. And I want to emphasize this because, you know, the media and the news, it's really exciting to talk about existential AI risks and trillion parameter models and who knows what else. But at the same time, most businesses are still simply grappling with ETL, building reports, building initial models, and understanding what they can do. And if you can go to them and show them that, whether that's today, whether that was 5 years ago, whether that's 5 years in the future, you're going to have an edge up and you're going to have a good opportunity to get a great job. The other thing that I want to emphasize here, and unfortunately, this is the more things change, the more they stay the same, yet it seems to be spinning faster, is it's becoming easier and easier to apply. And that anxiety that you voted on is also driving more applications. So one of the things that we see with a lot of folks is that they apply for jobs, they don't get a response, they start panicking, they apply for more jobs. On the recruiter side, what ends up happening is they're getting more applicants. They're not so much panicking as overwhelmed. They're making fewer quality decisions. So more decisions are kind of made rashly or without reviewing all of the applicants, which leads to more job postings, which of course leads to more applicants. And so this negative feedback loop affects everybody. 3 years ago, when we started kicking off these types of webinars, we were talking about people applying to 50 or 100 jobs and recruiters seeing maybe a few hundred applications for certain roles. Today, we're seeing thousands of applications for certain roles. And so this becomes overwhelming for everybody. And unfortunately, there's no good solution here, but I hope that it makes you feel a bit better to know that, you know, you're probably going to be applying for a few more roles, and at the same time, the competition is it's there. It's always been there. It's just a little more stark. Now, what do employers ultimately want, though? Again, if you can show them, and this hasn't changed, this won't change, if you can show them that you can solve their darn problems, whether that's communicating well, whether that's having a great portfolio, make it as easy as possible for them to see you and pick you. This is ultimately what they want and what will make things easier. When we talk about the skills people are looking for, I'll also emphasize quite a bit just how difficult this is for employers. So the more you could facilitate this, the easier it is for everybody. So what does this mean for you nowadays, especially within the next few months, if not longer? There's sort of I would say seven major takeaways. So the first is you'll be applying for more jobs. Again, it's in our one-on-ones. It's not uncommon to talk to folks who have applied for 100 plus roles, sometimes even more than that. So if you've applied to like 5, 6, or 10 roles and haven't heard back, don't worry, don't panic. That's normal. Keep going. Don't give up. Number two, more competition means you'll have to stand out via networking and original portfolios. This is also really, really critical. The people that we've talked to in our one-on-ones that have their dream jobs or are in the process of interviewing for their dream jobs, many of them have gotten those via networking, going to conferences and meeting folks, working with organizations like the Vector Institute, potentially just emailing or messaging people on LinkedIn about research that they're working on. All of this just makes things different, makes it easier for them. And if they have really interesting portfolio components that no one else has built or worked on, then that also makes them stand out. Skill requirements are changing more rapidly than before, so be aware of that, of course. I'll be talking about that in a lot more detail in a few minutes. At the same time, skills are becoming more important than credentials. Because things are moving so quickly and things are changing so fast, it's really hard to know what it means if you have an undergrad in computer science or a PhD in computer science, let's say. But if you tell me that you know how to use PyTorch, or if you know how to use Keras, or if you know how ETL works and you know how to optimize data pipelines, that helps me understand what you're doing. And regardless of whether you have a PhD, an undergrad, or no degree, I'll probably want to talk to you if I'm hiring for those things. Remember, again, the soft skills never go out of style. And this is something that I find a lot of people underemphasizing in their applications. If you can communicate well, if you can present well, if you mentor team members, employees well, if you build beautiful products, all of those things, they're softer skills, but they're very, very important. So help employers pick you. And finally, again, network and build a personal community. The Vector Institute is a great place for getting to know people, getting to know researchers, professors, employers, et cetera. So this is a good place to start. But beyond that, the more you build that personal community and network, the more likely you are to have jobs show up that might not even be published or publicly promoted. So I'll stop here just for a second to see if there are any questions that people might have. And one of the, so feel free to submit Q&As at any point throughout this presentation. One of the questions that I know has come up a few times now and today as well is, how do I actually promote my portfolio? So one of the things that often comes up in these conversations is, great, I've got a portfolio, I've published a bunch of things. Are employers actually finding this, and how do I show them? When do I show them? Certainly. Two things that I would say here that are incredibly important. One is this is where you really want to focus on networking. Reach out to people on LinkedIn, email folks, show them the work that you're doing. And number two, make sure that your resume actually has links to specific projects and specific things that you've done. So oftentimes what I see again is people will have like a GitHub repository, let's say, and they'll have 5 or 10 different, a GitHub page with like 5 or 10 different projects that they've worked on without any real context in terms of which project's the most impressive or relevant. And so that's very overwhelming. But if I see someone, let's say, message me, I work with natural language processing and LLMs quite a bit, and someone messages me and says, hey, I've been working on LLMs as well. Here's a project I've done on evaluation, let's say, or on explainability. You know that I will check that out. One other question that's coming up is, what exactly do I mean by portfolio? Is it a website, a GitHub? Great question. So ultimately here, what we do mean is having like a personal page where in an ideal world, it's a page that introduces you. So it might have your resume, and we'll have a list of projects that you've worked on, publications that you've published as well, so that you can show people what are some of your bigger accomplishments. Now, when it comes to portfolios, I'll also share a few links later in this presentation that you can see, although I'll say it very briefly here. If you go to phaseai.com, we have examples of Vector Institute grads from the last few years and their portfolios. So you'll actually be able to see how people have put this together in the past. But ultimately, what you want is a collection of projects that are really exciting to people and that emphasize your work. So I'll stop here with Q&A, but please keep going. And again, you've got my email if I miss anything. So we'll spend a few minutes on skills and upskilling now. So this is when it comes to that anxiety that we mentioned earlier, right? Where people are nervous and they feel like the job market is very challenging for them right now. Oftentimes, that also boils down to a concern that they don't have the right skills, or that the skills that they thought were current and up to date 12 months ago might not be current and up to date anymore. And so one of the things that I'll just start with is I want to talk about 4 types of skills as you strategize and think about your career. The first one, which we'll spend the most time on, is cutting edge data science skills. And I use the term data science extremely loosely here. So this could be AI ML, this could be data analytics, business intelligence, etc. But we're going to talk about this. That's certainly the big one right now. But I also want to emphasize for a bit recurring reliables. So these are the underlying skills where, again, Java hasn't gone out of style recently, and it's not going to go out of style anytime soon. For example, if you're really good at Java, you're probably going to have opportunities for various types of jobs. Third one is hybrid data skills. And so what we mean by hybrid here is you've got your data science and maybe you've got medicine, maybe you've got international development, maybe you've got public policy. And how you combine those 2 sets of skills will make you unique, because there's a lot of public policy people out there. There's a lot of AI ML people out there, but there's very few people who do both. And lastly, high-level themes. So these are things like product management, consulting, digital transformations. These are becoming a lot more relevant today. And so being aware that employers not only are hiring for them, but struggling with them is really important. So with that in mind, I have one more quick question for folks, because I'm curious how they're prioritizing these 4 before I talk about them. Of the 4 skill types listed, which one are you most keen to invest in? So if we can get the poll up again, would love to see the responses, and we'll let folks maybe spend 5 seconds answering them. All right, let's see those results. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. I'm not surprised that cutting. So I think folks can see the results, but we're getting 50% on cutting edge data science, 20% on hybrid, 14% high level, and 15% on recurring reliables. So I'm not surprised with the 50%. It's nice to see that everything else is quite balanced as well. So this is great. This is also, not surprisingly, how we've actually put the content together, but that's more of a coincidence. So we'll definitely be talking about cutting edge data science. I'm glad that folks are thinking about the other pieces. One of the things that I will emphasize too with this poll, of course, is while we asked you to pick one, in the real world, you could work on all 4. And in fact, I think the best and most powerful applicants, not even applicants, the people with the most interesting and amazing career trajectories, whether that's first job, second job, promotions, are the ones that combine all 4. So that's also something you'll want to think about. So with that in mind, we're going to start on cutting edge data science skills. So these are skills at the forefront of data and AI ML, right? They can be research oriented, they can be industrial. One of the things that I do emphasize when I'm speaking with folks about cutting edge data skills, however, is that it's a blessing and a curse, double-edged sword, so to speak, because it's also a constant race. Your CV looks really current and exciting today, but if you're not constantly keeping up with those cutting edge skills, very quickly things will get out of date and you might fall behind. Versus say they're more reliable skills over time. That's not the case with them. Now, this period is also very, very unique because the amount of knowledge and learning that's going on, especially when it comes to generative AI, is probably faster than any other period that we've seen. And a good example here is of a recent developer survey where actually a set of surveys where 92% of US-based developers say they're already using AI coding tools in and outside of work. Think about that. Like 3 years ago, this was not a thing. Even a year ago, pre-GPT-4, it wasn't really a thing. Now, more than 90% of folks are developers specifically are using AI coding tools. 70% of respondents are planning to use AI tools in their development process. Kind of same idea, same numbers in terms of the vast majority of folks. The other one that I think is really interesting, though, is this last point here, which is those learning to code are more likely than professional developers to be using or use AI tools today. This is really an important point because it shows too that folks who are earlier in their careers, I think, are a little more innovative, a little more open-minded to these tools, which again, if you're in that position right now and you're thinking about what you should be learning, how you should be learning it, etc., this is something that you definitely want to prioritize in some form. At the very least, be aware of what's going on and invest in specific types of skills, which we'll talk about. One of the points I want to make, though, is just how quickly things are changing. And I wanted to emphasize this with a seemingly sort of not at the forefront topic like data visualization. We often don't talk about data visualization quite in the same way as we talk about LLMs or computer vision today. But even those fields, these fields like this are changing very, very rapidly. If I was hiring 5 or 6 years ago, I'd be looking for folks who know Google Data Studio, Power BI, et cetera. These are still very important skills, of course. Then we started moving into Jupyter Notebooks, Matplotlib, things like that, followed by more recently Streamlit, Plotly. And you'll notice one of the things that's changing here, even as we start looking at folks that are very good at data visualization, is moving away from kind of like basic tools and drag and drop type tools to actually expecting folks to script a little bit in Python or even launch self-serve apps in some way. And of course, as you look at things today, Gradio, ChatGPT are tools that people are now hiring for, which are kind of the latest and greatest when it comes to data visualization. And as a case in point, if you're really keen on data visualization and you haven't played around with ChatGPT's data visualization solutions and data analysis tools, like that's a huge opportunity. A lot of people want to use those tools. They're not sure what they are. They're not sure how they fit into their technical stacks. So if you can come in and say, I've tried it and I have some experience here, that's great. And the other thing I want to emphasize here when it comes to upskilling and keeping current, this isn't the sort of thing where you have to have a PhD in ChatGPT. That's obviously impossible. What people are really looking for in these scenarios is just the fact that you're somewhat familiar with them and that you can address specific business problems and questions with these new tools, or at the very least know when these new tools apply versus when they do not. Now, some of the skills that are actually in demand today, based on what we're doing with employers and conversations we're having with students and also external research, there's 3 buckets that I really want to talk about. The first one, this blue one, is basically being able to use generative AI tools. So not necessarily, write research papers, but simply know what their capabilities are, know how to use them to solve business problems. And so when we see employers talking about this, again, we see things like ChatGPT and Midjourney. We see applications like AI content creation. Again, if you want to be in marketing and you want to be an AI-driven marketer, knowing how to write content with the help of ChatGPT or how to structure a workflow with ChatGPT and Midjourney is incredibly powerful. Then there's this middle bucket, which is more about configuring and customizing these tools, but again, not necessarily building them. So these are things like being able to create chatbots and use LLMs rather than logging into ChatGPT and using the front end. Model fine-tuning, tools like LangChain and BERT, and of course, prompt engineering. And this is, again, this isn't super technical, but it's technical enough that, again, you can customize tools. And that's what you want to show employers. And then the last bucket is that you can literally build completely new products, tools, solutions using this sort of technology. So knowing what vector databases are and knowing what retrieval augmented generation is, obviously TensorFlow, PyTorch, diffusion models, etc. And so the really important thing here that I want to emphasize is there's 3 types of stories that you can tell here. There's the story of, I know how to use these tools. So if you're a business and you're launching a new product or you're launching a new marketing campaign and you want to use generative AI, or if you're a team lead and you want to know how you could use co-pilots to improve a developer workflow, I know how to do those types of things. Then there's the I can configure these tools where, hey, we're launching something new. We're entering, let's say, the medical space, and no one's really used ChatGPT in a certain way in medicine. Well, I think I can help you configure existing tools to do that. And the last, of course, most technical is I can build these. So we can do completely new research. We can build new products. We can code things from scratch. And I want to, as you think about your story, as you think about reaching out to employers, what I would encourage you to do is think of which of these three buckets make the most sense for you. And then from a technical perspective, from a career trajectory perspective, and then choose how you invest in these tools and how you actually show people that you can use them. Now, there are a few different ways to keep up and to actually track what these types of skills are, which skills are becoming more and more relevant and in demand. Obviously, attending webinars like this one is a great place to start. There's lots of tech conferences out there. In fact, I would say tech conferences right now are probably the highest sort of signal to noise ratio. Lots of people going to them, lots of people presenting. There's meetups as well. One of the things that's been happening, I would say, over the last 5-6 years, certainly as the archive graph has been going up, is there's more and more reading groups. So there's data science reading groups where you can see what papers people are reading and discuss them. So even if you're not a researcher, you can meet with researchers who will help synthesize and analyze what the research is saying. There's Discord communities, Twitter, email newsletters. I'm being a little bit vague here because it really depends quite a bit on your specific area. And I'll give you an example, which is, again, one that sometimes people don't really think about when it comes to certainly data science, AI, ML, but I think is very relevant illustration, Django. So Django is a web framework. It's been around for about 20 years. A lot of people even ask the question, is it still relevant? Why am I not using React? Or why am I not doing something completely different? And even today, Django is still getting completely new versions, completely new features that are being released, things like asynchronous web calls or new API features. And if you want to be an expert in Django, for example, there's 2 sets of conferences every year, DjangoCon USA, DjangoCon Europe. You don't have to go and attend. You can watch the recordings themselves and skip to the highlights, for example. So the amount of investment you actually have to make here isn't like weeks every year or weeks every quarter. What you really just have to do is keep up to date, skim those recordings and decide if there's anything new that's coming up that you're learning. There's, of course, Reddit threads and subreddits like Django Learning. And of course, there's podcasts as well, right? And again, I'm not saying everybody on this call should go out and specifically learn Django, but rather that what you should do and ultimately want to focus on and emphasize is find the communities that are most relevant to your space, get involved in them, track them over time, and decide what skills, what topics are they bringing up that might be relevant for you from an upskilling perspective. This is also true on the research side, and I would say it's particularly difficult if you're a researcher because one of the things that comes up with research is the fact that, well, A, it's changing, but B, people don't often see the concrete impacts of research, right? So let's say you don't know what Django is and you learn it, you can show your employer that you can build web apps very quickly. Reading the most recent research papers might not actually have that same tangible result. At the same time, oftentimes what we find with employers, if people are moving from research into industry, is employers really often don't appreciate how much time it takes to read research papers and to keep up to date with them. And so they'll assume that this is something you're doing on the weekend, or that it's something that if you do every few months, you're going to be fine. In reality, it's probably something you want to invest in on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And so one of the things that I recommend doing here is, number one, just if you're working with an employer that doesn't hire a lot of researchers, educate them, show them why this is so important, number one. And number two is don't be afraid to ask for reading days. And what I mean by reading days is literally have people or have a manager give you a day, a week, or every other week, or maybe a few hours, so that you can just read those research papers. Again, it's very beneficial to them because you're obviously reading research papers that are relevant to you, relevant to your job. But at the same time, they might not realize that this is work. And so you need to do it. You need to educate them on it. Of course, there's conferences in academia. I won't go through these in too many details, but NeurIPS, KDD, ICML, there's tons that you could be attending. And that's another area that employers are often very happy to support. And again, you'll hear about this when we talk with our panelists as well, but research-oriented companies are very, very active at these conferences. And so they'll often be happy to send you or have you even publish papers there, because it helps with branding, it helps with knowledge sharing, and it helps ultimately with solving whatever problems they're trying to solve. Again, there are tons of online resources for this. The archive is a great one. The other one that not as many people are aware of that I really encourage, and I'll be talking about this during the technical interview portion of this presentation, is websites like Papers with Code, where you have the actual papers published, but you also have the code and the source code that maybe the researchers wrote get published as well, so that if you're actually trying to implement things, you'll be able to see their code and use it. It's a great way to practice coding based on research, and it's a great way to also keep up to date with the research itself. Again, there's tons of forums out there, and of course, there's the Vector Institute. I would encourage everybody here to go and go to every single research event that Vector's organizing. Now, one of the other things that I want to emphasize, especially since we're getting quite a few questions when it comes to portfolios, is a word of caution around ChatGPT. So one of the things that has changed quite a bit when it comes to people showing their skills and emphasizing their skills and capabilities is more and more folks are using ChatGPT, which is great. But what it also means is it's becoming easier to build certain types of applications. So 3 years ago, if someone applied for a job that I was hiring for, let's say an NLP, and they had a portfolio or a project that they show me where they're doing sentiment analysis of tweets, 3 years ago, that was relatively difficult to do, right? You had to potentially scrape Twitter. You had to build a model using BERT or Hugging Face Transformers or TF-IDF or something like that. Today, you could literally get ChatGPT API access and build a sentiment analyzer without doing any real data science. And as a result, the two things are happening. One, it's becoming difficult for me to see which types of portfolios are truly technical. And of course, now if I have to pick between multiple folks and some of the portfolios are technical and some I'm not so sure about, I'm going to go with the technical folks. And number two, some of the portfolio projects and illustrative projects that you might have been working on might be a little out of date. So if what you've been working on can very easily be built in ChatGPT, for example, strategize around that and try to emphasize the technical achievements that you've actually made when building those projects. On the flip side is if your portfolio is literally a bunch of API calls to ChatGPT, you're probably going to have a hard time impressing an employer. So I just want to emphasize that. The other word of caution that I want to emphasize here is around certificates. We get this question a lot. People ask if they should go out and get certifications. And, generally speaking, one of the things I recommend here is, again, skills are more important than qualifications. If you can show employers how you can use Python or PyTorch or GPT-based models or whatever else, that's more important than having the certification. Where I encourage people to get certifications and certificates is if your industry requires them. If you're working in cybersecurity, there's certain specific certifications that are actually relevant to cybersecurity. If you're working in DevOps, sometimes folks require like an AWS certification. So if your employers aren't specifically asking for them, I would de-emphasize this unless it's a personal learning experience for you. The other thing I want to emphasize here is most cutting edge data science skills don't have really good certifications yet. I'm not sure, like I see a lot of folks telling me they're debating whether to get like a certification in ChatGPT, for example. There's tons of books when you go to the bookstore on ChatGPT. I don't really know what they add. Like the content is changing so fast that by the time the book is published or the certificate is available, I feel like the content might already be out of date. So you really want to strategize here. And again, it's more important to simply get the skill set and illustrate it rather than worry about the certification. Again, I talked a little bit about this already, but everything I just said, it's also very important to manage your boss or your manager. So within this context of skills and upskilling, the company you're working for might be able to help you out. Oftentimes, especially if you're coming from grad school or academia, they might not be familiar with how to help you unless you're joining a corporate research lab specifically. But many of these employers ultimately want you to be successful. So you'll have to take some initiative and be proactive and be open with them and ask them for certain things. This means managing your own network and your learning, and also being transparent with your manager or your HR function about your objectives and asking them for support. So ask them for those reading days. If there's a professional development budget, it might not be, let's say, enough to go to a conference. Sometimes, again, companies are happy to top it up to make sure you can go to that conference, especially if you're publishing. So just make sure you do this and that you're proactive. Okay, so that's cutting edge data science. If you're picking up ChatGPT, if you're picking up LLMs, if you're picking up generative AI, if you can show whether you can build the tools, whether you can configure them, or whether you can use them to solve your employer's problems, I think you're going to be in a great spot. What I do want to talk about for a few minutes now is some of these other skills. The first one is recurring reliables. One of the things that I really emphasize for folks is, while it's, again, everybody likes to read about generative AI right now, it's a fun topic, right? It's existential AI risk is even more interesting. It's like sci-fi meets your day-to-day job. How cool is that? Or how scary is it, depending on how you're looking at it. But the other thing that I want to emphasize is that there's a lot of skills that don't go out of style. This is a screenshot from a recent developer survey in terms of hiring, and the vast majority of people are working with JavaScript, HTML, Python, SQL, right? These tools, they're going to be important 5 years from now. They were important 20 years ago. They're going to probably be important 20 years from now too, right? And so if you can show that you're good at these things, that's really, really important. And it provides a really, really, really solid base. Similarly, if I have to choose between someone who's keeping up with cutting edge data science, but doesn't really understand or know Python, or doesn't have good kind of developer practices, yes, it's exciting that they know certain things about generative AI, but if I'm not sure if they'll be good over the years, then I probably will go with someone who's a little more, has that kind of stable base of skills as well. Companies today need Python, JavaScript, Excel, Power BI, etc. So make sure you're emphasizing those. And I want to give you an example here of some of these oldies but goodies that we often forget about, especially if you're coming from academia. My one biggest gripe here is around data set curation and creation. So oftentimes when you're working in academic settings in particular, you will be given a data set because there's a lot of standardized data sets. In industry, you often have to build those data sets yourself. And so this is a huge challenge. And again, you'll notice there's no specific technology or language here. The idea here is, can you just build good data sets? Do you know what that means? Do you know how to run a survey, or do you know how to crawl the web properly? These are the sorts of things that become really exciting to folks. ETL, same idea, and data pipelines. Can you actually connect that raw data that you're collecting into the model? Really, really valuable. And again, often forgotten. Tools that maybe not as popular now, especially in those developer surveys, but certain specialized companies are desperate for, are MATLAB, Stata, SPSS, etc. These are all really critical data science tools that people often forget. And of course, Excel. I mean, Excel works really, really well. And a lot of companies are desperate for people who know how to use Excel properly and how to use it in a scalable fashion. But of course, remember that these also require upskilling. I'm sort of talking, let's say, about kind of high level things like ETL or data pipelines. The actual technologies might be changing. And so again, you still want to go to the conferences. Just because you have the recurring reliable skills doesn't mean that you can stop worrying and retire and coast for the rest of your life. What it means is instead that you've got a theme that you're going to work around. And so when it comes to things like data pipelines, a few years ago, you would have been, certainly 20 years ago, it would have been SQL and Bash, for example. Then AWS comes along, Talent comes along, and now you've got things like Snowflake, DBT, Airflow, etc. So these things are changing still, and you do want to keep up to date, but of course, in a slightly different way. Second last skill or theme is hybrid data science. Again, really important here because I think particularly the crowd that we have at this webinar, I think we're all very diverse. And one of the pieces of feedback that drives me crazy that people seem to get when they go through resume reviews with their guidance counselor or their career center at school is de-emphasize these other things. They're not as relevant. And I actually encourage people to do the opposite. If you can actually show how all of your other experiences make you a better kind of person that can problem solve and build models, then that's incredible. Like an obvious example is medicine. We have a lot of folks at U of T in particular that I meet with that are hanging around UHN, for example, where they have that medical or biological background and they want to pivot into AI ML. Well, when you combine the two, there's very few people who can do both. Another example that comes up a little less frequently, but I think is actually really, really cool, especially this week, is people who have public policy or international development experience, where they maybe they studied politics and then they pivoted into AI or into computer science, and they're not sure, like, well, is it relevant? Is it not relevant? It's like, you know what? Especially right now, if you've been talking to employers over the last few years about public policy and AI, there's a good chance they're really excited to talk to you today, because this week has been particularly important when it comes to that. And so sometimes you can't predict these things, but at the very least, you can show how you can combine these different things. The other piece that's really important here is sometimes these other subject areas make you a better kind of abstract thinker or problem solver. So again, something like public policy or international development, just since I'm kind of thinking about that now, you might be really good at managing stakeholders. And so now if I'm hiring a consultant who needs to know data and AI, but also will be dealing with maybe contentious clients or stakeholders, having that experience is really interesting to me. And at the very least, you can tell a really good story that will be compelling. So where your various vast experiences with Pride, try to combine the two. And again, a really wonderful place to combine the two to illustrate this is in your portfolio. If you build a project that combines your various interests, that's really incredible, and it'll really stand out. It'll make you seem like a very original person and a very original thinker. And then finally, what I do want to talk about is high-level themes. This is kind of that last bucket. And with high-level themes, really what you want to do is emphasize, can you solve the business problem? Can you communicate your solutions? Can you ship a product? Can you manage a data science project for me? And these are usually themes that are more like important from a managerial perspective. But I do want to emphasize them here because oftentimes, especially right now, a lot of businesses are investing in AI and trying to use AI for bigger strategic purposes, and they're going to struggle. I guarantee you, they're all going to struggle. And the reason they're going to struggle is it's really fun, again, to talk about LLMs and how an LLM or a neural network converges, let's say, over time. But what's hard afterwards is to say, great, can we actually take that neural network and build a product around it? Or can we train users to use it, to trust it? And so things like product management, user experience, sales and marketing, solution engineering, and digital AI transformation and consulting, these are areas where they're much more business focused, much more focused on kind of people skills. But if you have a data science base, or you can be that bridge, it's incredibly powerful. I won't spend a lot of time on this because we've run a few different webinars in the past about this specific topic. So there are a few links here, specifically nuances of data roles and hybrid career trajectories. Our last webinar, Launching Your AI Data Career in 2023, we spent a lot of time on product management, on AI transformations, et cetera. So I would encourage you to check those out. Because we don't have a ton of time, I'm going to skip the Q&A here and talk a little bit about technical interviews. And so in about 10 minutes, we can then start the panel as well. And I'll save some time for Q&A at that point, and we'll have some time at the end. And of course, you can bring up your questions with the panel as well. But I do apologize for that. So when it comes to technical interviews, there's a few high-level things I want to bring up here. Again, I want to emphasize that technical interviews are about skills. I want to show you also that ultimately it's about solving your employers' or potential employers' problems. The reason we have these really complex, weird technical interviews that stress everybody out, employers and applicants, is because ultimately the employer is trying to make a good decision from a hiring perspective. They don't want to waste time. It's when you make the wrong decision, it can literally waste tens of thousands of dollars, months of work. And so and at the same time, when it comes to cutting edge data science skills, it's really difficult to know what good is. So we'll talk a little bit about the interview process and how you can prepare, and also how you can use job postings to know how you should be practicing your technical interviews. So first, I want to emphasize this part around skills and the fact that employers are overwhelmed. This is a study from McKinsey that was published recently, and the top two challenges that employers have when it comes to hiring is skills validation and finding job seekers with those right skills and getting them to apply. You'll notice it's not onboarding, it's not retention, it's not deciding who to apply, who to screen, and things like that. It's really about skills. And another good example here, this is from another report, is that there's been a huge increase, 21% in job postings on LinkedIn that are prioritizing skills over qualifications. So a qualification here would be potentially a certificate. It could be your academic credentials. People are more and more interested in skills now. And I think this is a trend that will continue. And a good example, illustration here in particular is around prompt engineering. If I'm hiring a prompt engineer, what degree should they have? Like, I don't think there was, like, if you're graduating, prompt engineering was not a thing when you started school, right? And that was 3-4 years ago, maybe slightly longer. But basically, it's like these things can be changing so quickly. And in fact, I was recently working with a startup that was hiring a prompt engineer, and literally this picture is representative of all of us interviewing prompt engineers. And the reason for this is, again, number one, we didn't know what to look for, right? Do we hire an AI researcher, someone with a PhD or master's in comp sci, or do we hire a subject matter expert, someone that maybe knows the space we're working in really well and doesn't have a background? I mean, prompt engineering, technically you don't need to know how to code, right? But it helps to know how an LLM works. So this becomes really confusing. How do we test for this, right? Again, it's most people who were applying have used ChatGPT, but is that enough? I don't know. And I say I don't know, and I'm like, arguably I should know, right? And on top of that, we were getting applicants from all over the place. And so what we ended up doing, the structure, the way we put all of this together was, first, we had hundreds of people that we considered. We actually looked at two different types of people to bring on board: consultants and full-time roles. Consultants being like literally LLM researchers who consult on the side, versus full-time roles. And we literally had 6 people come in for day-long sessions with us, where they would spend 6 hours with us, 6 to 8 hours, excuse me, with us to actually work through a prompt engineering problem. We had to role play because we didn't know how else to do this. And so as you think about this, ask yourself, what is the employer looking for? Why are they interviewing you? And ultimately, going back to the start of the presentation, it's about solving their darn problems. So from that prompt engineering case study, you don't need to have an AI PhD, as long as you can come in and show that you're very thoughtful about prompt engineering, that you think about data set validation, that you think about building data sets properly, and of course applying the lessons learned to a prompt and iterating on it. That's wonderful. So ultimately, that's what you want to do, right? Is show that you could solve those problems. Whether that's converting a business problem to a data science one, shipping a product, or taking initiative in other ways. And again, I'll spend more time on this in the actual panel discussion, so we can show some illustrations. But ultimately, what you want to then do as a result is, if you're going through a technical interview, it's really about emphasizing that you can learn, that you can convert a business problem that they have, into a technical problem that you can then solve. Now, the way that this process typically works, again, this is, I'm going to breeze through this somewhat quickly, because we have a few webinars we've run in the past, but there's a few different places where these sorts of technical interview components will come up. There might be a phone screen up front where you'll get a few questions asked from a technical perspective. There's going to be a remote interview, probably, that might last an hour or so, that'll dive into a little more detail. On-sites, which I put in quotes because this could be, essentially, these are interviews where you're going to spend several hours with the employer. So in that prompt engineering example that I mentioned, this is where we had the 6 folks show up for a day. There might be testing and a stakeholder presentation and a negotiation. If you're very curious about the process itself, and if you're specifically worried about tactics that you could be using within this process, again, we've got a few great webinars that we've run in the past. Acing Data and AI Interviews is the most relevant one here that we run with the Vector Institute. By the way, all these YouTube links, if you go to the Vector Institute's YouTube channel, they're all there as well. So if you're if you lose the links for whatever reason, just remember that. Um, Now, there are a few updates to these webinar components that I do want to emphasize, however. So again, skills are becoming more important. End-to-end projects are becoming more important. And what I mean by end-to-end projects here is don't just show me you know Python. Don't just tell me that you know AI. If you can show me a working demo, let's say using Streamlit or Gradio or something like that, or a Django app where I can put something in and get something out, all of that shows that not only can you write code and solve problems, but you can actually ship solutions. That's really, really powerful. And by the way, oftentimes a lot of these technical interviews really focus on that. What they're trying to get out from you isn't like, do you know the difference between a set and a list in Python? People care, but they don't care that much. What they really care about is, can you use Python to build my product? Which is why this is so important. Lead coding is still a thing. So this is where you might be pair programming, or you might be asking asked very specific questions. But this idea of problem solving and solution architecture is becoming more and more relevant over time as well. One of the things that I do also want to emphasize here is, in addition to doing these mini projects and showing your employer that you're going through this, if you are going through the interview process, particularly if a recruiter has reached out to you to schedule some of those initial calls, ask them what the process is like. Again, don't be afraid to confidently just dive into what the process is and how you should prepare. Some companies, particularly bigger ones, actually have resources that they'll be able to share with you to walk you through the process and tell you what you should prepare for, how you should prepare. Smaller companies might not have those resources, but if you ask, generally speaking, people will gladly help you. So now there's, I'm going to go through 3 specific types of technical interviewing strategies and prep strategies here based on all of this, for researchers, applied data and AI folks, and then business. And the reason I want to talk about these separately for 2 or 3 minutes is that depending on what you're looking for, or how you're looking, depending on the type of role you're looking for, excuse me, the actual prep process and the technical interviews will be a little different. So on the research side, if I'm interviewing people and running a technical interview, ultimately what I'm trying to figure out as an employer is, can you do cutting edge research, and can you take cutting edge research and convert it into my specific business problem, and to solve my business problem or my technical problem? And so a few things that you want to do. The first is, actually, I'll throw the middle out first. Read papers and practice critiquing them. A very common strategy here for technical interviews is, we'll give you a research paper and we'll say, great, read it over. We want to hear your thoughts on it, maybe in 30 minutes or something like that, or you might get this the night before. The idea here is, can you read research and decide whether it's relevant or not, what the pros and cons are, etc. The other thing that many people struggle with in research is actually taking research papers and writing code, implementing those research papers. And so that's another area that you want to practice. And Papers with Code is a good website where you'll actually be able to see examples like this. And last but not least, practice your business communication. One of the hardest things I find for researchers switching from research into industry is actually presenting and communicating their results. And solving a problem with business stakeholders. So if you can do that, that's the cherry on top. That's the thing that gets people really, really excited. On the applied AI and data side, this is a very broad category: ML ops, DevOps, data analytics, etc. A few things are really important here. This is the one where having a beautiful portfolio that is aligned with your strengths and the applications you're going to be working with is really important. If you go to phaseai.com, we've got a bunch of links there, specifically from Vector grads, that I think are just wonderful examples of this. The point here is, show, don't tell. If you're telling me you're a good data visualization person, you know what tells me more, you know what's more effective than telling me you're a good data visualization person? Showing me a really good data visualization you've built, right? That's the sort of thing that we often look for here when it comes to portfolios. Practice top-down communication. And a big pro tip here is record yourself. So oftentimes I find people will, they won't really practice their presentations ahead of time. So the first time they're presenting is in front of an employer or in front of an interviewer. And of course, then they ramble on, they're not quite ready. What you could do instead is pick a project. And by the way, if you're a researcher, pick a paper, maybe record yourself critiquing it or presenting whatever it is you're presenting. Go to sleep, wake up the next day, watch the recording once you've lost the context a little bit and see, am I presenting clearly? Am I presenting confidently? Am I getting the right points across? All of this is really important. And then on the business side, in a similar way to the applied piece, focus on a portfolio, show that you can architect solutions to problems. The big thing that most people on the business side, whether that's consultants or managers even more broadly, that really struggle is actually knowing enough about the technology to keep the technology experts honest. Not that anyone's trying to fool you, but it's really difficult, especially in cutting edge spaces, to know what's realistic and what isn't. Everyone's telling you that generative AI is going to solve everything, right? That's like right now, that's certainly what I'm hearing. And so having the ability to see through that a little bit and reality check it and is really important. And so the architecture piece here is going one step further to say, okay, great, we're hearing about generative AI, we're hearing about LLMs predicting the next token in a sequence. Is that relevant to our business? How is it relevant to our business? Is it valuable and strategic to our business? If you could answer that question, you are amazing. The other thing that I would recommend is you don't need to be an expert coder if you're on the business side, but knowing how to code certainly helps. If you can script in Python, if you can script in VBA, let's say for Excel, then again, you're certainly a cut above everybody else. Now, one of the final thing that I'll say about all of this is if you're not sure how to prepare, if there's certain jobs you're looking for, review the job postings themselves. I'm going to go through this very, very quickly, but to give you an example, we're going to have Christina from Cohere speaking. Here's an example of a job posting where in this case, Cohere is talking about you may be a good fit if, right? If you've, and the last bullet point in particular really speaks to me. If you have built data pipelines and ETL processes to support large scale data sets, if you have a portfolio that shows this, if you're comfortable with building ETL pipelines and talking about them, Cohere is probably going to be very excited about you. Another example, also in the LLM space, is Anthropic. In their job postings, they actually have a representative project section. And so in this case, this is literally, if you worked on projects like this, they'll probably want to interview you, but also this is probably what your job looks like. So if you, when it comes to preparing for a technical interview, if you can literally, let's say I'll take the third bullet point, making a Wikipedia data set in a format that models can easily consume. What you can do to prepare now, let's say that you have a job interview with Anthropic next week, take Saturday, take tomorrow, and literally ask yourself, how does the Wikipedia data structure look? How do I crawl it? How do I convert it into something that makes sense for an LLM to ingest in some way, or to train a new LLM potentially? What are those steps? Record yourself, architect it, literally diagram it out on a whiteboard. I won't go through these examples because I definitely want to get to the panel, but one of the final things that I will say here is as you're going through this process, just remember, record yourself, focus on the specifics. The more specific you get, the more powerful you seem and the more competent you seem. So if someone who tells me they're good at AI, I don't know what that means. If they tell me they know how to use BioBERT for medical EHR optimization in some form, that's certainly a lot more powerful. Practice shipping end-to-end products and solutions. You could hire expert interviewers. That's something that some folks do right now, or you could go to the mock interviews that we run with Vector. And of course, buddy up. You could do all of this with someone who's in your shoes as well. Again, given the time, I do apologize. I have all your Q&As right here on this iPad, so I will be using these to inform the panel. And so without further ado, I'd love to kick that off. I'd like to introduce Christina and James. So James leads hiring and tech innovation at OMERS. And before that, he was also growing Shopify's data team. He also focuses on data. Well, he does focus on data, but he also focuses on diversity and inclusion and helps implement recruitment best practices. So James, thank you for being here. And Christina, thank you as well. Christina leads talent programs at Cohere, focuses on engineering, research, NLP talent, but she's also done this across a wealth of other companies, startups and large ones like Wealthsimple, Deloitte, Intuit, BMO, and more, and also is very passionate about lifelong learning and upskilling, which we've obviously been discussing. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you both for joining us today. Before we actually go into the Q&A, I'd love to even hear from both of you. You've heard through this webinar, we've been talking about upskilling. We've been talking about the technical interview process. At the very start, we heard that literally like 90% of people here are actually like really nervous. If you had one or two pieces of advice to give to everyone on this webinar, what would they be? And James, maybe I'll start with you if you can maybe kick off with your advice.
Good. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, awesome.
Perfect.
So what I would say is one piece of advice that I would try to like give to anyone that's starting off looking for any jobs in AI and ML is to not try to do everything all at once. It's a pretty exciting field. There's lots of trends going around when it comes to generative AI and ChatGPT, but with high demand comes even higher expectations. And don't put that on yourself when you're first starting off. I would say use the crawl, walk, and run method and just set up those foundational skills of programming and mathematics and algorithms before you get into the more advanced topics of machine learning models and transformers. And so that would be my one piece of advice.
That's wonderful. Christina.
Yeah, I love that. I love crawl, walk, run, James. I think that's very great advice. But I mean, I would just say, I know it's nerve-wracking, but everyone's kind of rooting for you. And remember, a lot of you are in that same position. So I think we're going to talk more about networking and so forth. But I do think networking, just continuing to always be learning, adding to your skill set in your portfolio, I think is great things to focus on. And generally, like, my favorite piece of advice is always just, you're not learning and growing if you're not feeling uncomfortable. So it might feel scary and uncomfortable, but when you're feeling that way, it's probably a good thing, right? You're doing the right things. So yeah, just do more of that and the right opportunities will come.
And Christina, I'm curious from your perspective as you're talking about especially portfolios, especially getting comfortable, like portfolios have come up in quite a few of the questions that have been submitted as well. What are some of the things that you're looking for when it comes to portfolios or when it comes to like projects that people have worked on in the past?
Yeah, good question. I think it's definitely something that is important to us, depending on the role that you're looking for at Cohere and what specific team, just I think any well-related projects, whether it's school research stuff, whether it's a hackathon project even, or something you've just done in your free time, I think those things always stand out. And I think, from a portfolio perspective and just generally like your portfolio being a big part of just your personal brand. And I think for us, it is important that we have people that are just like super excited about the space and about LLMs and NLP at Cohere and excited about our mission. So I think any projects and the way that you kind of showcase that through your portfolio is really what stands out.
And is there a project that you've seen in the past that you're like, whoa, that was really cool?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like projects, so we do a ton of hackathons at Cohere and we're like so passionate about that and building. So like truly it is like we love seeing your projects and we love seeing what you've built with Cohere and our APIs. And even in our application, we do ask you, like, have you ever built something with Cohere? If you have, drop the links and all of our teams and hiring managers will look at those. So it's definitely a great piece of advice, like build something using that product and then, apply and make sure that's crisp in your application. But in terms of specific projects, yeah, just exciting things built with Cohere. We see that, often. But aside from that, I think I've seen just some really creative things and, people send me videos to go along with like their project and their portfolio, or they have a really interactive sort of portfolio where it's like you travel around and visit like their different skill sets and their different projects on like a little app or something like that. So I just think those things like definitely make you go, wow. I know it's not something that is the norm, but I think for roles that you're really, really passionate about, take the extra bit of time to really try to make your portfolio and your application stand out, and it will go a long way.
I think the advice there too of if you're applying for a company that's building a technical product that you can use, you should probably use the product.
Definitely.
That's awesome.
A great look when you get on the first call and it's like, oh, so have you ever built? And it's like, no, I haven't, gotten around to it. Oh, okay. So.
James, I'd love to hear in a similar way, especially since Omer's is I guess not a consumer facing product in quite the same way, how you think about portfolios or projects in advance and how people stand out.
Yeah, no, great question. And there is that difference because we aren't consumer facing and don't have products that are like AI and ML specific. And so when it comes to organizations like OMAS, or I would say different industry organizations that want to leverage AI and ML, I would say the most relevant types of portfolios and projects really emphasize business impact. And so when it comes to different organizations, a lot of them are really looking to see how AI and ML can make their business better, more efficient, have more profit for the most part, or reduce costs. And so utilizing and leveraging those in different projects, like, oh, well, I built this machine learning model in order to reduce the risk of investments by X amount, or by increasing profits by this amount. And it could be, you could even do these things on a personal level of building like AI machine learning models for your personal stock portfolio, and how that could be utilized and kind of overlap with any business impact projects and portfolio. So I'd say those are the ones that really stand out, how much the business impact is.
That's interesting. And is there a portfolio or a project that you've seen in the past that's really stood out to you from that perspective?
Yeah, I would say because we are heavy in the investment space. So, two things that we look at is reducing risk of investments, but also increasing profit. So when we see individuals who have done that at other financial institutes, it's really, really good. And, we want to be able to bring those folks in and kind of do the same thing for our organization.
Very cool. And one of the questions, actually, there's a theme here, I would say, across multiple questions coming up, which is recent grads or even people who are still in school. OMERS, Cohere, like these are really exciting companies, maybe a little intimidating as well. How does a student get on your radar? And maybe, James, I'll start with you and we can go to Christina afterwards.
Yeah, I would say, to some of Christina's points earlier, is that networking is key, whether it's through the Vector Institute, through different conferences, through different communities. If you're able to network and get to know individuals within the organization, and a lot of people who are doing these roles right now, like data scientists or even managers or directors in those type of roles, are very open to coffee chats and meeting up with new grads and individuals. They're humans too, they love to connect and get to know more of the younger generation, and what sort of potential they come up with. And then when that connections happen and those relationships are built, a lot of times managers come up to me like, oh, I just met this great student, really eager, has done X, Y, and Z at their school in academics, and I think that they would be a great fit for this role that we have available.
One of the things that, because you're mentioning coffee chats, events as well. I know sometimes people get really nervous, especially at hiring fairs. You go to a booth and there's like 50 people there and you're not sure how to have the conversation. Are there other ways aside from, like, let's say a fair like that, like how if I were a student graduating and really interested in OMERS, how do I get that coffee chat, or how do I show that I'm serious when it comes to having a career with OMERS?
Yeah, so I would say that, you don't always have to start off at the highest levels. You can even, reach out and connect with individuals who are maybe even just starting their career at an organization. So junior data scientists or junior machine learning engineers. And I think just being involved in the communities and the conferences, and then just practice overall, I think it's going to be really beneficial for individuals who are a little bit more nervous and scared to kind of connect with individuals.
Oh, that's super helpful. I think, you raise a good point, which is that oftentimes when people think about reaching out, they're thinking of like C-level executive, VP. You don't have to start there. I love that. And Christina, in a similar way, I mean, I know Cohere is in the news quite a bit right now. It's can be quite intimidating, and you probably get a lot of applicants right now as well. I'm gonna actually split the question into two for you, because there's new grads, like let's say PhD level grads, where they might be coming in through like a very research oriented approach. And then there's also probably folks finishing their undergrads where they'd love to work for a company like Cohere. Is there a place for them? And if so, how do they apply? How do they get on your radar?
I love the question. And, first off, what I'd like to say is, I know it's a hot time for us and can be intimidating, and I can see that, and definitely a ton of interest in joining us and so forth, like we're seeing across this whole space. But we hire so many people from so many different backgrounds. It's absolutely incredible. So, and from a grad perspective, I always get the question from students and interns, like, do you hire first years? Do you hire second years? Do I need to have like hardcore ML experience or whatnot? And the answer is no. And we hire students at all levels. We've hired a multitude of first year students. We've hired a number of boot camp grads and boot camp students as well, college grads and students. And then you have, your masters and PhDs and so forth. So one, yes, there's absolutely a place for everybody. And, there's different teams and capabilities that are needed. And we love that diverse perspective. In terms of just getting on our radar and standing out, I think, for me, I've also been doing campus recruitment for the past like 10, 11 years. I've hired thousands of students at many orgs. And I would say at least 70-75% of all the students I've hired have often been folks that I've met at events or hackathons or conferences, like James has said. So I can't stress enough the value of community building and being at networking events and just like really embedding yourself into those things. You meet incredible people, especially hackathons for the more technical people, like anything where you can go build something with other people and do it in front of employers that you're interested in. I think it's really great. So I think that's a great way to really make connections with the employers you're most interested in and really stand out, getting your face in front of somebody versus like just being the resume in the pile. So yeah, definitely get out there, be networking, and even if it's not like personal face-to-face kind of stuff, Discord community, Slack groups. Cohere has a Discord community. We have our C4AI research community. We do like tech talks and reading groups and all this stuff. Like get involved in that, right? You're going to meet people and those people could lead you to those opportunities and those connections. So I think that's definitely a way to stand out, is just embed yourself in the areas that you're most interested in.
I think you've already referred to a few, but one of the questions coming up is what are some of those networking events that you would recommend? Are there specific ones that you're particularly excited about or look forward to in the coming weeks or months?
For sure. And that's a big part of my role as like a talent programs manager, is managing a lot of our events and partnerships. So one, we hit a lot of like the big research conferences and we have big presence there. So things like EMNLP, NeurIPS we will be at, ACL and all of those big conferences. And we're always, looking to meet great people there and also just stay on top of the great research and stuff that's going on in the industry. Hackathons as well. We plan a number of great hackathons all over campuses, and we do that from like a university perspective and like just a general population perspective. So if you're interested, hit up our website on Cohere. We have an events page and we do list out any of our different tech talks, reading groups. We do stuff almost weekly. So great ways to build community and conferences, hackathons, any of the big ones like Collision. We had BPTN conference happening last week here. So just, all of those things are great.
Amazing. James, same question for you. Are there specific events or places where you're like, yes, this is the place to go if you want to work for OMERS or a company like OMERS?
Yeah, I would say, making sure that you follow the organization that you want to join and then look at all the affiliations and partnerships that they currently have. And so whether it's Cohere, whether it's OMERS, or whether it's another organization, you can really tell from the social media posts of what events that they go to. Christina just mentioned BPTN. I was at BFuture last week as well. And I posted it on social media with, OMERS kind of posts. And then obviously we partnered up with the Vector Institute. So looking at those networking events. So if you tie back the organization with the partnerships and communities that are already embedded and involved with, I think that's going to be a really key way to go about it. I also like to see for AI and ML Kaggle competitions. And so that's a really big one that's utilized as well.
Do you have to win a Kaggle competition or how good do you have to be before you're good enough for OMERS?
I think it's just being part of the community, being part of the
Mm.
competition, putting yourself out there and showing your work, like Christina was mentioning, I think is the biggest step forward. But it doesn't hurt to win a competition or two.
Or two. Oh gosh. Okay. There's a really great question that was raised earlier that I'm very curious what both of you think. Are resumes still important? I'll let either of you jump in first because that one's an interesting one.
That is a hot one. And I haven't thought about it in a while, but it's a good question. Generally, I think yes, I think, generally being able to put your best foot forward on your resume is very important, and to stand out to all those jobs you're applying to and make sure things are a great reflection again of you, your personal brand, your skill set. Being able to do that in a great way on your resume is important. Right. But again, yes, networking and the community, and kind of getting in front of people is especially important. But I do find, even if it is, even through networking or referrals or whatnot, you get yourself into a process at a certain point, people are going to be looking at your resume and kind of referencing that. So yes, I do think it's still important. It needs to be the best reflection of you, and so oftentimes it is like the first perception of you, right? It's your first impression, and it is really important to me. James?
Yeah, no, those are some great points. One last point for partnerships and communities that I forgot to add is that we have a partnership with Microsoft, and so we go to a lot of Microsoft events and conferences as well. So that would be another good one. But when it comes to resumes, yes, resumes are still important. I think we are still slowly evolving on how resumes are, and so we've added a lot of other dimensions to it when it comes to having your own portfolio, having a website, but then also just LinkedIn in general. It's one of the it's the digital kind of resume, where we definitely evolved from what it was before, where it was all paper resumes, and that's all there was. But I think it's incorporating more different mediums and into your resume. So you'll see a lot on resumes now that they'll have a link to the LinkedIn, they'll have a link to the website or portfolio projects, and so making sure that you incorporate those digital aspects to your resume will evolve it, and it'll still continue to be used.
Amazing. And earlier on in this presentation, we also talked a lot about skills that employers might be looking for. So again, a two-parter here. When it comes to emphasizing skills on a resume, I know sometimes people have tables where they say, here are literally my skills. Sometimes they self-rate themselves. Question one is, how do you recommend people present their skills? And question two, as part of that, is also, are there specific skills that today, when you see a resume, you're like, yes, like that is the skill that I want to interview for, or that is the skill that shows a person has the expertise we're looking for? James, maybe you can start here.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I caught some of your presentation when it comes to being more skills-based and skills-based hiring. And it's definitely been a huge trend. And, we're looking towards that into the future, like the rest of the industry. And I would say, in regards to technical skills specifically on a resume, I think at least for us, we like to see it, at the very top as an overall technical skill set, but then also incorporating how you used it in different companies or different academic projects is very important as well. Because if you just list out, 100 different technical skills, but you don't really showcase how you use each technology and each skill, it's redundant at that point, and so it doesn't make any sense. So if you use Python, it's like, oh, how did you use Python? Oh, I use Python to build machine learning models, and then for this data science solution for X impact, right? And so I say utilizing it in that fashion is really beneficial.
Okay. And are there specific skills, technical or non-technical, where they're particularly exciting when you see them on the resume today?
I would say right now, how people use Python programming is definitely very key, but then also machine learning frameworks and libraries, and which ones they are experienced with and which ones they utilize. I think it's been very helpful when kind of analyzing resumes.
Excellent. Christina, same question. How to present those skills in a resume, and what are the skills that you're particularly excited about when you see them?
Yeah, for sure. So I am very much aligned to all of James's points. Definitely, I would say that you want to have those skills highlighted at almost the very top, if not, the beginning of your resume. I see it a lot, and especially with students sometimes where they have it at like the very bottom of their resume. So just think about resume in general, like order your skills and everything in order of importance. I always say, like, what would you want that recruiter to see first or to stand out first, and make sure that's then on the top. So in terms of skills, I think usually pretty important when it comes to the technical stuff. And similar to what James has said, I think, yeah, it's really important that you actually showcase where you have used those technical skills. How long have you used those technical skills, right? Or so, because you could be familiar with certain languages, but maybe you haven't used them in 6 years. Do you keep that on your resume, right? Or so I think like having a skills section is great near the top, and then also in those job specific experiences, whether it's project specific or it's like just, I worked at Cohere, here are the main technologies or like frameworks that I used, and then listing out the projects. But yeah, kind of embedding that into the actual like your bullet points as well to see how you've applied is important. And for us, I think in terms of skill sets, like when we're talking about like ML heavy folks and researcher ML engineers, obviously any experience working with transformers and familiarity there is important, or is stand out for those specific roles, and having specific experience with things like JAX and transformer technologies, and yeah, just familiarity with things like general model training, pre-training, things like that. So not to say that we require all of that knowledge or skills at every level, but for certain roles, like those would be some of the really standout things. In addition to research experience as well, so whether you're even just on software engineering or MLE side, like having a little bit of depth into research, whether published or not, I think is also a standout. And like James's other points, I would also say, again, like not just on your resume, but really important on your LinkedIn as well, to really be able to communicate those skills. And it's where you can kind of maybe like add a little bit more flavor or tone to like the projects you did and what technologies you use. But it's really important to your LinkedIn, your resume, your GitHub, all of those things together, and showcasing your skills in the best way.
Great. And oh, go
So
ahead.
I wanted to add one
Please.
interesting point to Christina's first point about the structure and then points of your resume. Just for everyone to know that the average recruiter spends about 6 to 8 seconds reviewing resumes. And so the order of importance and the structure does matter. So if you're keeping things, your resume is too long, or you're keeping things at the bottom that are super important, they may be overlooked.
Great point.
And
Jane, yeah, please.
We're so passionate about this topic, obviously, but
I love it.
thing I would say, because I don't want it to just, definitely not always just about the technical skills and those standout skills, but in terms of the soft skills, things that really stand out to me, and especially as a campus recruiter and looking at student profiles, is the folks that have that project experience or are really showcasing they love to learn and like lifelong learning. So students, especially when you're part of different community groups, you're going to hackathons, you're building projects on the side, or you even showcase, hey, I recently took this course on Coursera or LinkedIn, whether how long or short it was, put it on your resume. Like, I want to know you're doing stuff outside of the classroom and you're really like, passionate about the space. And that really stands out to us too. So thank you.
I love that. I think that enthusiasm, if there's like a meta theme that I'm noticing, it's like when people love learning this stuff and they're truly passionate about it, it's going to show up. Like you can sense it, right? In the resume, they have portfolios. It's not like a burden for them necessarily, and they're curious. So they show up on the Discord channel, or they show up at the networking event, and they're happy to have a coffee. So I love that. Well, Christina, James, thank you both so very, very much for joining us today. I do know that you're both actively hiring, so I will encourage everybody here to go to the Cohere and the OMERS website and apply for the right role. Not all the roles, but the right role. And hopefully folks reach out to you as well if they have any questions or anything else that they might need help with.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Bye.
So I will jump back into a very quick screen share. the very last thing that I will say is thank you everybody for powering through with us for an hour and a half. If there are questions that we didn't answer, feel free to shoot me an email at w@phaseai.com. And also, I want to say thank you to the Vector Institute and all of its supporters and funders as well. This was a fun event, and I hope it's helpful for everyone attending. So I hope you all have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend, and see you in a few months.